On the Trinity, Book 10, Chapter 1. The love of the studious mind, that is, of one desirous to know, is not the love of a thing which does not know. Let us proceed, then, in due order, with a more exact purpose to explain this same point more thoroughly. And first, since no one can love at all a thing of which he is wholly ignorant, we must carefully consider of what sort is the love of those who are studious, that is, of those who do not already know, but are still desiring to know any branch of learning. Now, certainly, in these things whereof the word study is not commonly used, love often arises from hearsay, when the reputation of anything for beauty inflames the mind to the seeing and enjoying it. Since the mind knows generically wherein consists the beauty of corporal things, from having seen them very frequently, and since there exists within a faculty of approving that which outwardly is longed for, and when this happens, the love that is called forth is not of a thing wholly unknown, since its genus is thus known. But when we love a good man whose face we never saw, we love him from the knowledge of his virtues, which virtues we know, abstractly, in the truth itself. But in the case of learning, it is for the most part the authority of others who praise and commend it that kindles our love of it. Although nevertheless we could not burn with any zeal at all for the study of it, unless we already in our mind at least a slight impression of the knowledge of each kind of learning. For who, for instance, would devote any care and labor to the learning of rhetoric, unless he knew before that it was the science of speaking? Sometimes, again, we marvel at the results of learning itself, which we have heard of or experienced, and hence burn to obtain, by learning, the power of attaining these results, just as if it were said to one who did not know his letters, that there is a kind of learning which enables a man to send words, wrought with the hand in silence, to one who is ever so far absent, for him to turn to whom they are sent to gather these words, not with his ears, but with his eyes. And if the man were to see the thing actually done, is not that man, since he desires to know how he can do this thing, altogether moved to study with a view to the result which he already knows and holds? So it is that the studious zeal of those who learn is kindled, and for that which anyone is utterly ignorant, he can in no way love. So also, if anyone hear an unknown sign, as, for instance, the sound of some word of which he does not know the signification, he desires to know what it is. That is, he desires to know what thing it is which it is agreed shall be brought to mind by that sound, as if he heard the word tementum uttered, and not knowing, should ask what it is. He must then know already that it is a sign, that is, that the word is not an empty sound, but that something is signified by it. For in other respects this trisyllabic word is known to him already, and has already impressed its articulate form upon his mind through the sense of hearing. And then what more is to be required in him, that he may go to a greater knowledge of that which all the letters and all the spaces of its several sounds are already known, unless that it shall be at the same time have come known to him that it is a sign, and shall have moved him with the desire of knowing of what it is the sign. The more, then, the thing is known, yet not fully known, the more the mind desires to know concerning it what remains to be known. For if he knew it only to be such and such a spoken word, and did not know that it was the sign of something, he would seek nothing further, since the sensible thing is already perceived as far as it can be by the sense. But because he knows it to be not only a spoken word, but also a sign, he wishes to know it perfectly. And no sign is known perfectly, except it be known of what is the sign. He then, who with ardent carefulness seeks to know this, and inflamed by studious zeal, perseveres in the search, can such a one be said to be without love? What then does he love? For certainly nothing can be loved unless it is known. For that man does not love those 3 syllables which he knows already. But if he loves this in them, that he knows them to signify something, this is not the point now in question. For it is not this which he seeks to know. But we are now asking what it is he loves, in that which he is desirous to know, but which certainly does not yet know. And we are therefore wondering why he loves, since we know most assuredly that nothing can be loved unless it be known. What then does he love, except that he knows and perceives in the reason of things what excellence there is in learning, which the knowledge of all signs is contained, and what benefit there is in the being skilled in these, since by them human fellowship mutually communicates its own perceptions, lest the assemblies of men should be actually worse than utter solitude, if they were not to mingle their thoughts by conversing together. The soul, then, discerns this fitting and serviceable species, and knows it, and loves it, and he who seeks the meaning of any words of which he is ignorant, studies to render that species perfect in himself as much as he can. For it is one thing to behold it in the light of truth, another to desire it as within his own capacity. For he beholds in the light of truth how great and how good a thing it is to understand, and to speak all tongues of all nations, and so to hear no tongue, and to be heard by none as from a foreigner. The beauty, then, of this knowledge is already discerned by thought, and the thing being known is loved, and that thing is so regarded, and so stimulates the studious zeal of learners, that they are moved with respect to it, and desire it eagerly in all labor which they spend upon the attainment of such a capacity, in order that they may also embrace and practice that which they know beforehand by reason. And so everyone, the nearer he approaches that capacity in hope, the more fervently desires it with love. For these branches of learning are studied more eagerly, which men do not despair of being able to attain. For when anyone entertains no hope of attaining his end, then he either loves lukewarmly or does not love at all, howsoever he may see the excellence of it. Accordingly, because the knowledge of all languages is almost universally felt to be hopeless, everyone studies most to know that of his own nation. But if he feels that he is not sufficient even to comprehend this perfectly, yet no one is indolent in this knowledge as not to wish to know. When he hears an unknown word, what it is, and to seek and learn it if he can. And while he is seeking it, certainly he has a studious zeal of learning, and seems to love a thing he does not know. But the case is really otherwise. For what species touches the mind, which the mind knows and thinks, wherein the fitness is clearly visible, which accrues from the associating of minds with one another, in the hearing and returning of known and spoken words? And this species kindles studious zeal in him who seeks what indeed he knows not, but gazes upon and loves the unknown form to which that pertains. If then, for example, anyone were to ask, what is tementum? For I had instanced this word earlier. And it were said to him, what does this matter to you? He will answer, lest perhaps I hear someone speaking and understand him not, or perhaps read the word somewhere and know not what the writer meant. Who, pray, would say to such an inquirer, do not care about understanding what you hear, do not care about knowing what you read? For almost every rational soul quickly discerns the beauty of that knowledge, through which the thoughts of men are mutually made known by the enunciation of significant words. And it is on account of this fitness thus known, and because known therefore loved, that such an unknown word is studiously sought out. Then, when he hears and learns that wine is called tementum by our forefathers, but that the word is already quite obsolete in our present usage of language, he will perhaps think that he still has need of the word on account of this or that book of those forefathers. But if he holds these also to be superfluous, perhaps he does now come to think the word not worth remembering, since he sees it has nothing to do with that species of learning which he knows with the mind, and gazes upon, and so loves. Wherefore, in all cases, the love of a studious mind, that is, of one that wishes to know what it does not know, is not the love of that thing which it does not know, but of that which it knows, on account of which it wishes to know what it does not know. Or if it's so inquisitive as to be carried away, not for any other cause known to it, but by the mere love of knowing things unknown, then such an inquisitive person is, doubtless, distinguishable from an ordinary student, yet does not, any more than he, love things that he does not know. Nay, on the contrary, he is more fitly said to hate things he knows not, of which he wishes that there should be none, in wishing to know everything. But lest any one should lay before us a more difficult question, by declaring that it is just as impossible for anyone to hate what he does not know, as to love what he does not know, we will not withstand what is true. But it must be understood that it is not the same thing to say he loves to know things unknown, as to say he loves things unknown. For it is possible that a man may love to know things unknown, but it is not possible that he should love things unknown. For the word to know is not placed there without meaning, since he who loves to know things unknown does not love the unknown things themselves, but the knowing of them. And useless he knew that knowing means, no one could say confidently, either that he knew or that he did not know. For not only he who says, I know, and says so truly, must needs know that what knowing is, but he also who says, I do not know, and says so confidently and truly, and knows that he says so truly, certainly knows what knowing is. For he both distinguishes him who does not know from him who knows, when he looks into himself and says, Truly I do not know. And whereas he knows that he says this truly, whence he should know it, if he did not know what knowing is. Chapter 2. No one at all loves things unknown. No studious person, then, no inquisitive person, loves things he does not know, even while he is urgent with the most vehement desire to know that he does not know. For he either knows already generically what he loves and longs to know it also in some individual or individuals, which perhaps are praised, but not yet known to him, and he pictures in his mind an imaginary form by which he may be stirred to love. And whence does he picture this, except from those things which he has already known? And yet perhaps he will not love it, if he finds that form which was praised to be unlike that other form which was figured and in thought most fully known to his mind. And if he has loved it, he will begin to love it from that time when he learned it, since a little before, that form which was loved was other than that which the mind that formed it had been wont to exhibit to itself. But if he shall find it similar to that form which report had proclaimed, and to be such that he could truly say, I was already loving you, yet certainly not even then did he form a love he did not know, since he had known it in that likeness. Or else we see somewhat in the species of the eternal reason, and therein love it. And when this is manifested in some image of a temporal thing, we believe the praises of those who have made trial of it, and so love it. Then we do not love anything unknown, according to that which we have already sufficiently discussed above. Or else again, we love something known, and on account of it seek something unknown, and so it is by no means the love of the thing unknown that possesses us, but the love of the thing known, to which we know the unknown thing belongs, so that we know that that too which we seek still as unknown, as a little before I said of an unknown word. Or else, again, everyone loves the very knowing itself, as no one can fail to know who desires to know anything. For these reasons they seem to love things unknown who wish to know anything which they do not know, and who, on account of their vehement desire of inquiry, cannot be said to be without love. But how different the case really is, and that nothing at all can be loved which is not unknown, I think I must have persuaded everyone who carefully looks upon truth. But since the examples which we have given belong to those who desire to know something which they themselves are not, we must take thought lest perchance some new notion appears when the mind desires to know itself. Chapter 3. That when the mind loves itself, it is not unknown to itself. What then does the mind love, when it seeks ardently to know itself, while it is still unknown to itself. For, behold, the mind seeks to know itself, and is excited thereto by studious zeal. It loves, therefore, but what does it love? Is it itself? But how can this be when it does not yet know itself, and no one can love what he does not know? Is it that report has declared to it its own species, like the way we commonly hear of people who are absent? Perhaps, then, it does not love itself, but loves that which it imagines of itself, which is perhaps widely different from what itself is. Or if the fantasy of the mind is like the mind itself, so when it loves this fancied image, it loves itself before it knew itself, because it gazes upon that which is like itself. Then it knew other minds from which to picture itself, and so is known to itself generically. Why, then, when it knows other minds, it does not know itself, since nothing can possibly be more present to it than itself? But if, as other eyes are more known to the eyes of the body, then those eyes are to themselves, then let it not seek itself, because it never will find itself. For eyes can never see themselves except in looking glasses. And it cannot be supposed in any way that anything of that kind can be applied also to the contemplation of incorporeal things, so that the mind should know itself, as it were, in a looking glass. Or does it see in the reason of eternal truth how beautiful it is to know oneself, and so loves this which it sees, and studies to bring it to pass in itself? Because, although it is not known to itself, yet it is known to it how good it is, that it should be known to itself. And this, indeed, is very wonderful, that it does not know itself, and yet knows already how excellent a thing it is to know itself. Or does it see some most excellent end, such as its own serenity and blessedness, by some hidden remembrance, which has not abandoned it, although it has gone far onwards, and believes that it cannot attain to that same end which it knows itself? And so while it loves that, it seeks this, and loves that which is known, on account of which it seeks that which is unknown. But why should the remembrance of its own blessedness be able to last, and the remembrance of itself not to be able to last as well? So that it should know itself which wishes to attain, as well as know that to which it wishes to attain. Or when it loves to know itself, does it love, not itself, which it does not yet know, but the very act of knowing, and feel the more annoyed that itself is wanting to its own knowledge, wherewith it wishes to embrace all things? And it knows what it is to know. And while it loves this, which it knows, desires also to know itself. Whereby, then, does it know its own knowing, if it does not know itself? For it knows that it knows other things, but that it does not know itself. For it is from hence that it knows also what knowing is. In what way, then, does that which does not know itself as knowing anything? For it does not know that some other mind knows, but that itself does so. Therefore it knows itself. Further, when it seeks to know itself, it knows itself now as seeking. Therefore again it knows itself, and hence it cannot altogether not know itself, when certainly it does not know itself as that it knows itself as not knowing itself. But it does not know itself not to know itself. Then it does not seek to know itself. And therefore, in the very fact that it seeks itself, it is clearly convicted of being more known to itself than unknown. For it knows itself as seeking and as not knowing itself, in that it seeks to know itself. Chapter 4. How the mind knows itself, not in part, but as a whole. What then shall we say? Does that which know itself in part not know itself in part? It is absurd to say that it does not as a whole know what it knows. I do not say it knows wholly, but that it knows, as it as a whole knows. When therefore it knows anything about itself, which it can only know as a whole, it knows itself as a whole. But it does not know that itself knows something, while yet except as a whole it cannot know anything. Therefore it knows itself as a whole. Further, what in it is so known to itself as that it lives? And it cannot at once be a mind and not live, while it has also something over and above, such as that it understands. For the souls of beasts also live, but do not understand. As therefore a mind is a whole mind, so it lives as a whole. But it knows that it lives, therefore it knows itself as a whole. Lastly, when the mind seeks to know itself, it already knows that it is a mind. Otherwise it knows not whether it seeks itself, and perhaps seeks one thing while intending to seek another. For it might happen that itself was not a mind, and so, in seeking to know a mind, that it did not seek to know itself. Wherefore, since the mind, when it seeks to know what the mind is, knows that it seeks itself, certainly it knows that itself is a mind. Furthermore, if it knows this in itself, that it is a mind, and not a whole mind, then it knows itself as a whole. But suppose it did not know itself to be a mind, but in seeking itself only knew that it sought itself. For so, too, it may possibly seek one thing for another, if it does not know this, but that it may not seek one thing for another, without doubt it knows what it seeks. But if it knows what it seeks, and seeks itself, then certainly it knows itself. What therefore more does it seek? But if it knows itself in part, but still seeks itself in part, then it seeks not itself, but a part of itself. For when we speak of the mind itself, we speak of it as a whole. Further, because it knows that it is not yet found by itself as a whole, it knows how much the whole is. And so it seeks that which is wanting, as we are wont to seek to recall to the mind something that has slipped from the mind, but has not altogether gone away from it, since we can recognize it, when it has come back, to be the same thing that we are seeking. But how can mind come into mind, as though it were possible for the mind not to be in the mind? Add to this that if, having found a part, it does not seek itself as a whole, yet it is as a whole it seeks itself. Therefore as a whole it is present to itself, and there is nothing left to be sought. For that is wanting which is sought, not the mind which seeks. Since therefore it as a whole seeks itself, nothing of it is wanting. Or if it does not as a whole seek itself, but the part which has been found seeks the part which has not been found when the mind does not seek itself, of which no part seeks itself. For the part which has been found does not seek itself, nor yet does the part itself which has not yet been found seek itself, since it is sought by that part which has already found. Wherefore, since neither the mind as a whole seeks itself, nor does any part of it seek itself, the mind does not seek itself at all. Chapter 5. Why the soul is enjoined to know itself. Whence come the errors of the mind concerning its own substance? Why therefore is it enjoined upon it that it should know itself? I suppose, in order that it may consider itself and live according to its own nature, that is, seek to be regulated according to its own nature, such as under him to whom it ought to be subject, and above those things to which it is to be preferred, under him by whom it ought to be ruled, and above those things which it ought to rule. For it does many things through vicious desire, as though in forgetfulness of itself. For it sees some things intrinsically excellent, in that more excellent nature which is God, and whereas it ought to remain steadfast that it may enjoy them, it is turned away from him by wishing to appropriate those things to itself, and not to be like to him by his gift, but to be what he is on by its own, and it begins to move and slip gradually down into less and less, which it thinks to be more and more, for it is neither sufficient for itself, nor is anything at all sufficient to it, if it withdraw from him who is alone sufficient. And so through want and distress it becomes too intent upon its own actions, and upon the unquiet delights which it obtains through them, and thus, by the desire of acquiring knowledge from those things that are without, the nature of which it knows and loves, and which it feels can be lost unless held fast with anxious care, it loses its security, and thinks of itself so much less, in so proportion as it feels the more secure that it cannot lose itself. So whereas it is one thing to know oneself, and another not to think of oneself, for we do not say of the man that is skilled in much learning that he is ignorant of grammar, when he is only not thinking of it, because he is thinking at the time of the art of medicine. Whereas, then, I say it is one thing not to know oneself, and another not to think of oneself. Such is the strength of love, that the mind draws in with itself those things with which it has long thought of with love, and has grown into them by the close adherence of diligent study, even when it returns in some way to think of itself. And because these things are corporal, which it loved externally through the carnal senses, and because it has become entangled with them by a kind of daily familiarity, and yet cannot carry those corporal things themselves with itself internally, as it were, into the region of incorporeal nature. Therefore it combines certain images of them, and thrusts them thus made from itself into itself. For it gives to the forming of them somewhat of its own substance, yet preserves the while something by which it may judge freely of the species of those images, and this something is more properly the mind, that is, the rational understanding, which is preserved that it may judge. For we see that we have those parts of the soul which are informed by the likeness of corporal things, in common also with beasts. Chapter 6. The opinion which the mind has of itself is deceitful. But the mind errs when it so lovingly and intimately connects itself with these images, as even to itself to be something of the same kind. For it is conformed to them to some extent, not by being this, but by thinking it is so. Not that it thinks itself to be an image, but outright that very thing itself of which it entertains the image. For there still lives in it the power of distinguishing the corporal thing with which it leaves without, from the image of that corporal thing which it contains therefrom within itself, except when these images are so projected as if it felt without, and not thought within, as in the case of people who are asleep, or mad, or in a trance. Chapter 7. The opinions of philosophers respecting the substance of the soul. The error of those who are of opinion that the soul is corporal does not arise from defective knowledge of the soul, but from their adding there to something foreign to it, what is meant by finding. When, therefore, it thinks itself to be something of this kind, it thinks itself to be a corporal thing. And since it is perfectly conscious of its own superiority, by which it rules the body, it has hence come to pass that the question has been raised, what part of the body has the greater power in the body? And the opinion has been held that this is the mind, nay, that it is even the whole soul altogether. And some accordingly think it to be the blood, rather than others the brain, others the heart. Not as Scripture says, I will praise you, O Lord, with my whole heart, and you shall love your Lord your God with all your heart. For this word, by misapplication or metaphor, is transferred from the body to the soul. But they have simply thought it to be that small part of itself of the body, which we see when the inward parts are rent asunder. Others, again, have believed the soul to be made up of very minute and individual corpuscles, which they call atoms, meeting in themselves and cohering. Others have said that its substance is air, others fire. Others have been of the opinion that it is no substance at all, since they could not think any substance unless it is body, and they did not find that the soul was body. But it was in their opinion the tempering together itself of our body, or the combining together of the elements, by which that flesh is, as it were, conjoined. And hence all of these have held the soul to be mortal. Since, whether it were body, or some combination of body, certainly it could not in either case continue always without death. But they who have held its substance to be some kind of life, the reversal of corporal, since they have found it to be a life that animates and quickens every living body, have by consequence striven also, according as each was able, to prove it immortal, since life cannot be without life. For as to that fifth kind of body, I know not what, which some have added to the four well-known elements of the world, and have said that the soul was made of this, I do not think we need spend time in discussing it in this place. For either they mean by body what we mean by it, such as that of which a part is less than the whole in extension of place, and they are to be reckoned among those who have believed the mind to be corporal, or if they call either all substance, or all changeable substance, body, whereas they know that not all substance is contained in extension of place by any length and breadth and height, we need not contend with them about a question of words. Now, in the case of all these opinions, anyone who sees that the nature of the mind is at once substance, and yet not corporal, that is, that it does not occupy a less extension of place with a less part of itself, and a greater with a greater, must needs see at the same time that they who are of opinion that it is corporal do not err from defect of knowledge concerning mind, but because they associate with it qualities without which they are not able to conceive any nature at all. For if you bid them conceive of existence, that is, without corporal phantasms, they hold it merely nothing. And so the mind would not seek itself, as though wanting to itself. For what is so present to knowledge as that which is present to the mind? Or what is so present to the mind as the mind itself? And hence what is called invention, if we consider the origin of the word, what else does it mean, unless that to find out is to come into that which is sought? Those things accordingly which come into the mind as it were of themselves are not usually said to be found out, although they may be said to be known, since we do not endeavor by seeking to come into them, that is, to invent or find them out. And therefore, as the mind itself really seeks those things which are sought by the eyes or by any other sense of the body, for the mind directs even the carnal sense, and when finds out, or invents, when that sense comes to the things which are sought, so too it finds out or invents other things which it ought to know, not with the medium of corporal sense, but through itself, when it comes into them. And this, whether in the case of a higher substance that is in God, or of the other parts of the soul, just as it does when it judges of bodily images themselves, for it finds these within, in the soul, impressed through the body. Chapter 8. How the soul inquires into itself. Whence comes the error of the soul concerning itself? It is then a wonderful question, in what manner the soul seeks and finds itself, at what it aims in order to seek, or whither it comes, that it may come into or find out. For what is so much in the mind as the mind itself? But because it is in those things which it thinks of with love, and is wont to be insensible, that is, in corporal things with love, it is unable to be in itself without the images of those corporal things. And hence shameful error arises to block its way, while it cannot separate from itself the images of sensible things, so as to see itself alone, for they have marvelously cohered with it by the close adhesion of love. And herein consists its uncleanness, since, while it strives to think of itself alone, it fancies itself to be that, without which it cannot think of itself. When, therefore, it is bidden to become acquainted with itself, let it not seek itself as though it were withdrawn from itself, but let it withdraw that which has added to itself. For itself lies more deeply within, not only than those sensible things which are clearly without, but also than the images of them, which are indeed in some part of the soul, such as that which beasts also have, although these wanting understanding, which is proper to the mind. As therefore the mind is within, it goes in some sort from itself, when it exerts the affection of love towards these, as it were, footprints of many acts of attention. And these footprints were, as it were, imprinted on the memory, at the time when the corporal things which are without are perceived in such way, that even when those corporal things are absent, yet the images of them are at hand to those who think of them. Therefore let the mind become acquainted with itself, and not seek itself as if it were absent, but fix upon itself the act of voluntary attention, by which it was wandering among other things, and let it think of itself. So it will see that at no time did it ever not love itself, at no time did it ever not know itself, but by loving another thing together with itself, it has confounded itself with it, and in some sense has grown one with it. And so, while it embraces diverse things, as though they were one, it has come to think those things to be one which are diverse. Chapter 9. The mind knows itself by the very act of understanding the precept to know itself. Let it not therefore seek to discern itself as though absent, but take pains to discern itself as present. Nor let it take knowledge of itself as if it did not know itself, but let it distinguish itself from that which it knows to be another. For how will it take pains to obey that very precept which is given it, know thyself, if it knows not either what know means or what yourself means? But if it knows both, then it knows also itself, since know yourself is not so said to the mind as is know the cherubim and the seraphim, for they are absent, and we believe concerning them, and according to that belief they are declared to be certain celestial powers. Nor yet again, as it is said, know the will of that man. For this is not within our reach to perceive at all, either by sense or understanding, unless by corporal signs actually set forth, and this in such a way that we rather believe than understand. Nor again, as it is said to man, behold your own face, which he can only do in a looking glass. For even our own face itself is out of the reach of our own seeing it, because it is not there where to look can be directed. But when it is said to the mind, know yourself, then it knows itself by that very act in which it understands the word yourself. And this for no other reason than that it is present to itself. But if it does not understand what is said, then certainly it does not do as it is bid to do. And therefore it is bidden to do that thing which it does do when it understands the very precept that builds it. Chapter 10. Every mind knows certainly three things concerning itself: that it understands, that it is, and that it lives. Let it not then add anything to what is it which it knows itself to be, when it is bidden to know itself. For it knows, at any rate, that this is said to itself, namely, to the self that is, and that lives, and that understands. But a dead body also is, and cattle live. But neither a dead body nor cattle understand. Therefore it so knows that it is so is, and that it so lives, as an understanding is and lives. When, therefore, for example's sake, the mind thinks itself air, it thinks that air understands. It knows, however, that itself understands, but it does not know itself to be air, but only thinks so. Let it separate that which it thinks itself. Let it discern that which it knows. Let this remain to it, about which even they have doubted, who have thought the mind to be this corporal thing or that. For certainly every mind does not consider itself to be air, but some think themselves fire, others the brain, and some one kind of corporal thing, others another, as I have mentioned before. Yet all know that they themselves understand, and are, and live, but they refer understanding to that which they understand, but to be and to live to themselves. And no one doubts either that no one understands who does not live, or that no one lives of whom it is not true that he is, and that therefore by consequence that which understands both is and lives, not as a dead body in which it does not live, nor as a soul lives which does not understand, but in some proper and more excellent manner. Further, they know that they will, and they equally know that no one can will who is not and who does not live. And they also refer that will itself to something with which will with that will. They know also that they remember, and they know at the same time that nobody could remember unless he both was and lived. But we refer memory itself also to something, in that we remember those things. And therefore the knowledge and science of many things are contained in two of these three, memory and understanding. But will must be present, that we may enjoy or use them. For we enjoy things known, in which things themselves the will finds delight for their own sake, and so reposes. But we use those things, which we refer to some other thing, which we are to enjoy. Neither is the life of man vicious and culpable in any other way, other than as wrongly using and wrongly enjoying. But it is no place here to discuss this. But since we treat of the nature of the mind, let us remove from our consideration all knowledge which is received from without, through the senses of the body, and attend more carefully to the position which we have laid down, that all minds know and are certain concerning themselves. For men certainly have doubted whether the power of living, of remembering, of understanding, of willing, of thinking, of knowing, of judging, be of air or of fire, or of the brain, or of the blood, or of atoms, or besides the usual form four elements of a fifth kind of body, I know not what, or whether the combining or tempering together of this our flesh itself has power to accomplish these things. And one has attempted to establish this, and another to establish that. Yet whoever doubts that he himself lives, and remembers, and understands, and wills, and thinks, and knows, and judges, seeing that even if he doubts, he lives. If he doubts, he remembers why he doubts. If he doubts, he understands that he doubts. If he doubts, he wishes to be certain. If he doubts, he thinks. If he doubts, he knows that he does not know. If he doubts, he judges that he ought not to assent rashly. Whosoever therefore doubts about anything else ought not to doubt of all these things, which if they were not, he would not be able to doubt of anything. They who think the mind to be either a body or a combination or tempering of the body will have all these things to seem to be in a subject, so that the substance is air or fire or some other corporal thing, which they think to be the mind, but that the understanding is in this corporal thing as its quality, so that this corporal thing is the subject, but the understanding is in the subject, such as that the mind is the subject, which they judge to be a corporal thing, but the understanding, or intelligence, or any other of those things which we have mentioned as certain to us, is in that subject. They also hold nearly the same opinion who deny the mind itself to be body, but think it to be the combination or tempering together of the body. For there is this substance, that the former say that the mind itself is the substance, but which the understanding is, as in a subject, but the latter say that the mind itself is in a subject, such as in the body, of which it is the combination or tempering together. And hence, by consequence, what else can they think, except that the understanding also is in the same body as in a subject? And all these things do not perceive that the mind knows itself, even when it seeks for itself, as we have already shown. But nothing is at all rightly said to be known while its substance is not known. And therefore, when the mind knows itself, it knows its own substance. And whence it is certain about itself, it is certain about its own substance. But it is certain about itself, as those things which are said above prove convincingly, although it is not at all certain whether itself is air or fire or some body or some function of body. Therefore it is not any of these things. And to that whole which is bidden to know itself belongs this, that it is certain that it is not any of those things of which it is uncertain, and is certain that it is only that which only it is certain that it is. For it thinks in this way of fire, or air, or whatever else the body it thinks of. Neither can it any way be brought to pass that it should so think that which itself is, as it thinks that which itself is not. Since it thinks all these things through an imaginary fantasy, whether fire, or air, or this or that body, or that part or combination and tempering together of the body, nor assuredly is it said to be all those things, but some one of them. But if it were any one of them, it would think this one in a different manner from the rest, such as, not through an imaginary fantasy, as absent things are thought, which either themselves or some kind of like kind have been touched by the bodily sense, but by some inward, not feigned, but true presence, for nothing is more present to it than itself. Just as it thinks that itself lives and remembers and understands and wills, for it knows these things in itself, and does not imagine them as though it had touched them by the sense outside itself, as corporal things are touched. And if it attaches nothing to itself from the thought of these things, so as to think itself to be something of the kind, then whatsoever remains to it from itself, that alone is itself. Chapter 11. In memory, understanding, or intelligence, and will, we have to note ability, learning, and use. Memory, understanding, and will are one essentially and three relatively. Putting aside, then, for a little while all the other things of which the mind is certain concerning itself, let us especially consider and discuss these three: memory, understanding, will. For we may commonly discern in these three the character of the abilities of the young also, since the more tenaciously and easily a boy remembers, the more acutely he understands, and the more ardently he studies, the more praiseworthy is he in point of ability. And when the question is about one's learning, then we ask not how solidly and easily he remembers, or how shrewdly he understands, but what it is that he remembers, and what it is that he understands. And because the mind is regarded as praiseworthy, not only as being learned, but also as being good, one gives heed not only to what he remembers and what he understands, but also to what he wills. Not how ardently he wills, but first what it is he wills, and then how greatly he wills it. For the mind that loves eagerly is then to be praised, when it loves that which ought to be loved eagerly. Since, then, we speak of these three, ability, knowledge, use, the first of these is to be considered under the three heads of what a man can do in memory and understanding and will. The second of them is to be considered in regard to that which any one has in his memory and his understanding, which he has attained by a studious will. But the third, that is, use, lies in the will, which handles those things that are contained in the memory and understanding, whether it refers them to anything further, or rest satisfied with them as an end. For to use is to take up something into the power of the will, and to enjoy is to use with joy, not any longer of hope, but of the actual thing. Accordingly, everyone who uses enjoys, for he takes up something into the power of the will, wherein he also is satisfied as with an end. But not everyone who uses enjoys, if he has sought after that which he takes up into the power of the will, not on account of the thing itself, but on account of something else. Since, then, these three, memory, understanding, will, are not 3 lives, but 1 life, nor 3 minds, but 1 mind. It follows certainly that neither are they 3 substances, but 1 substance. Since memory, which is called life, and mind, and substance, is so called in respect to itself, but it is called memory relatively to something. And I should say the same also of understanding and of will, since they are called understanding and will relatively to something, but each in respect to itself is life and mind and essence. And hence these 3 are one, in that they are 1 life, 1 mind, 1 essence, and whatever else they are severally called in respect to themselves, they are called also together, not plurally, but in the singular number. But they are 3, in that wherein they are mutually referred to each other, and if they were not equal, and this not only each to each, but also each to all, they certainly could not mutually contain each other, for not only is each contained by each, but also all by each. For if I remember that I have memory and understanding and will, and I understand that I understand, and will, and remember, and I will that I will, and remember and understand, and I remember together my whole memory, and understanding, and will. For that of my memory which I do not remember is not in my memory, and nothing is so much in the memory as memory itself. Therefore I remember the whole memory. Also, whatever I understand, I know that I understand, and I know that I will whatever I will. But whatever I know, I remember. Therefore I remember the whole of my understanding, and the whole of my will. Likewise, when I understand these 3 things, I understand them together as a whole. And there is none of things intelligible which I do not understand, except what I do not know. But what I do not know, I neither remember nor will. Therefore, whatever of things intelligible I do not understand, it follows also that I neither remember nor will. And whatever of things intelligible I remember and will, it follows that I understand. My will also embraces my whole understanding and my whole memory, while I use the whole that I understand and remember. And therefore, while all are mutually comprehended by each, and as wholes, each as a whole is equal to each as a whole, and each as a whole at the same time as to all wholes. And these 3 are one life, 1 mind, 1 essence. Chapter 12. The mind is an image of the Trinity in its own memory and understanding and will. Are we, then, now to go upward, with whatever strength of purpose we may, to that chiefest and highest essence, of which the human mind is an inadequate image, yet an image? Or are these same 3 things to be yet more distinctly made plain in the soul, by means of those things which we receive from without, through the bodily sense, wherein the knowledge of corporal things is impressed upon us in time? Since we found the mind itself to be such in its own memory and understanding and will, that since it was understood always to know and always to will itself, it was understood also at the same time always to remember itself, always to understand and love itself, although not always to think of itself as separate from those things which are not itself, and hence its memory of itself and understanding of itself are with difficult discerned in it. For in this case, whether these two things are very closely conjoined, and one is not preceded by the other by any time at all, it looks as if there were not two things, but one called by two names. And love itself is not so plainly felt to exist when the sense of need does not disclose it, since what is loved is always at hand. And hence these things may be more lucidly set forth, even to men of duller minds, if topics are treated of as are brought within reach of the mind in time, and happen to it in time, while it remembers what it did not remember before, and sees what it did not see before, and loves what it did not love before. But this discussion demands now another beginning, by reason of the measure of this present book.